So today we published a post called HIE Genetics on our blog. And it's a research roundup because there is so much going on to try to understand HIE genetics, which is a very large topic and there are multiple factors. And when we talk about genetics, there are multiple things to talk about. So when we talk about genetics, a lot of people go right to genetic syndromes, and there are a couple of different factors there. One, there are some genetic syndromes that can mask and look like HIE that aren't actually HIE. There are also some genetic syndromes that can be co-occurring with HIE. And then there's also genetic mutations that happen from inherited. So that would be from maternal paternal influence. And then there's some that are called de novo, which is just a spontaneous genetic mutation that happens in the development of babies. And then there's also genetic influence of what could potentially put some babies at higher risk for developing HIE. And there are some theories that some researchers are looking at to see if there are some babies that, for instance, the stress of labor is too much and that's what leads to their HIE, and that there are genetic influence factors for that. Really fascinating. So, there's multiple researchers looking at this and trying to understand these different maternal, paternal, and baby gestation factors with genetic influence for HIE. So there was a comment about a mom saying, oh great, here comes more mom guilt. But you know what? The more we understand, the more we can decrease the incidence and impact of HIE. And that is a win in my book, and what we're focused on as a mission for our organization. It is no guilt necessary because you don't know. And if we don't know, we can't help it, right? So more data, more research, and understanding is a great thing for our community and others, because then we can look at what we can actually do about it. So on the research roundup, we highlighted a few different of the latest published research, and there's lots of different things going on. So there's research going on from OB-MFMs, there's research with neonatology, there's research with pediatric neurology, and it's all really exciting because we didn't have any of this a decade ago, none of it. So some of these are looking at one of the biggest things, that the last one here is from a group in South Africa who did this project to build a database and look at genetic variants of concern, of more of that maternal paternal, that things that could lead to HIE. And identifying like a top 10 to see if there is some sort of surveillance that can improve prenatal care for those families to better monitor, right? So before, we wouldn't know that those families are potentially high risk. This could tick that high risk box, which could lead to better outcomes. One of the other things when we talk about genetics is that understanding how genes express themselves when they are in different stress states. So one of the studies that's linked here looked at the genetic expression of babies and looking at could we find out why some babies do not respond to cooling like others do. And there's a theory that more of the chronic hypoxia in utero does not respond as well to cooling as the more intermittent, closer to birth or during birth sentinel HIE causes. And then when you know more of that, then you look at how can we intervene and what can we build to help that population. The third example I want to talk about right now is something that we've talked about before in the epilepsy space, with a researcher named Dr. Shilpa Kadam, who has done a ton of work, and she's working on a therapeutic right now that could help 2 cohorts of our kids with epilepsy. So she discovered that the KCC2 pathway is often impacted from HIE, and that there's 2 different cohorts that could benefit from a targeted therapeutic. One, babies that experience phenobarb-resistant neonatal seizures in HIE. And then the second cohort that she just discovered that she was not actually initially looking to find are babies that have a more mild recovery from HIE, mild outcomes, who go on to develop epilepsy at the sleep-wake cycle later in childhood. And raise your hand if your child went and did that. Mine and many, many others, and there's more all the time in our community whose children develop this sleep-wake cycle epilepsy later in childhood. And if you have epilepsy with your child, it is, a lot of the medication decisions are trying to figure out what works, and it's really based on trial and error. So with this new research and others like it, targeted, more effective therapeutics can be developed, which means your kid will have better seizure control, will have a better quality of life, because you know that you're getting something that can directly target what that pathway is, and then you're not having to throw potentially all the kitchen sink to see what will work. You can better target and better treat for better outcomes. So at the bottom of this blog post, there's additional resources. NIH has some incredible fact sheets and infographics. There's an organization called Global Genes that has a ton of educational stuff about just understanding genetic influence, genetic mutations, things like that. Kids Health has some great things, and how it's explained to kids. They have kid and teen resources. And then Once Upon a Gene is a podcast that really digs deep into genetic mutations and the genetic, supporting families with genetic diagnoses and things like that, with a lot of great information about advocacy and research. This is quite the long video because there's a lot to talk about here. But for anyone that's interested in learning more, you can always. We will continue the conversation, as we always do, with new research that's being published, and hope that this is helpful. It's really exciting to see that there is new understanding that, again, can lead to decreasing the incidence and impact of HIE, targeted therapeutics, targeted treatments, for everyone to live a better life. And that is the goal. So I would say no guilt, no shame. This is good news for our community.